sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Kansas City, Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties. I am your moderator, Misty Yeager, and a proud member of this league. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan national organization now over 100 years old. Despite our name, our membership is open to everyone. We are an issues-oriented organization. We neither screen nor endorse candidates. Our forum provides information and education so that voters can make informed choices at the polls. We envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. Our mission is to empower voters and to defend democracy. We are here for this 90-minute voter education event to provide an opportunity for voters to listen as the candidates present their positions on questions which have been submitted to the League via the email address forumquestions@lwvkc.org. All the candidates have been invited to participate in our forum tonight. We welcome and appreciate these candidates being with us. We have Sonia Nizami, Democrat candidate for District 30, Kemp Strickler, Democrat candidate for District 34, John Burrows, Republican candidate for District 35, and Carrie Engel, Democrat candidate for District 35. I would also like to introduce you to the other league members volunteering with me tonight. Our forum chair is Anitra Steele, our timer is Elizabeth Dar, and our tech host is Terry Lane. Our forum will be recorded and available on the league's webpage, lwvkc.org, as well as on Facebook. Let me explain the format for tonight's forum. I will be asking each of the candidates to respond to the voters' questions in random order determined by this grid here. They will have 90 seconds to respond to each question. Candidates, please answer the question asked and stick to the topic. There will be no rebuttals, but you can go back to an issue during your closing remarks. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. Our first question, what has motivated you to run for the state legislature and what experience do you bring to the office? Carrie, we'll start with you.
Thank you. And thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. It's incredibly important that our electorate be knowledgeable and be educated about all of the issues on the ballot and the candidates that want to serve them. I am a licensed master social worker, and I have worked in Jackson County for the Children's Division, Child Welfare, and foster care, and investigations and adoptions. I've also worked in mental health in the community and in schools. And so in 2018, I decided that it was time to basically do social work at the macro level and influence policy at the state level, where I felt I could make the biggest impact on vulnerable communities that generally do not have lobbyists and stakeholders at the table to make the best evidence-based policies for them. At the most vulnerable Missourians in the state are our kids, they're our elderly. They're often people with, like I said, not a lot of lobbyists and not a lot of people advocating for them at the state level. A lot of bad policy come out and a lot of barriers for them to be able to access the services that they needed. There also hadn't been a Democrat that had run in my district for several years, and I felt that it was time that there be a choice in House District 35. So that's why I've run, and that's why I continue to serve this district. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Kemp. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, sorry about that. Hi, everyone, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting the forum. Thank you to everyone listening in, and thanks also to the candidates who chose to be here tonight. My name's Kemp Strickler. I'm running for state representative in House District 34, and I've lived here in Lee's Summit for 36 years. This is where my wife, Christy, and I raised our daughter. We love it here. And I'm running for office because I want to make sure that our Missouri state government is working for Lee's Summit and is working for all of our citizens. As to experience, I have experience in several leadership roles that I believe will help me in the legislature. I've served on advisory boards at the University of Missouri. I'm the board moderator for our church, and I'm currently serving on the Lee Summit Arts Council. Professionally, I worked for 35 years at Hallmark Cards, leading data analytics and marketing research teams. And I think that background will give me the experience that I need to understand the data that is presented to legislators, to listen to constituents, listen to subject matter experts, and then to take all of that and bring it together to help implement common sense solutions to the challenges facing all Missourians. So I'm looking forward to the exchange of ideas tonight. Very honestly, wish my opponent was on here as well, but I hope that I can earn your support.
Right,
Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this. League of Women's Voters is a fantastic organization. I appreciate all that you do. My motivation to run is pretty simple. I'm a Jackson County native. Folks moved us here in 1979. I've got 5 kids. My wife and I have 5 children, and 2 are in the Lee Summit School District. So I feel like we've got skin in the game. I do have a background in working with governmental entities. I've served both the states of Missouri and Kansas, as well as the Kansas Municipality Insurance Trust with regard to working with them on cost containment and workers' compensation. I served for 8 years in the Army Reserve. I've got 9 years of college. I'm an anthropologist. I appreciate Carrie's background in social work. I too spent time in the field working with folks. Currently, I serve with Civil Air Patrol. I'm the government relations advisor for national headquarters over the 52 wings, and I work on the congressional budget with Senator John Tester and some of the others. I've got a background in insurance, healthcare, military, and education, and I feel that I am supremely qualified to serve in this role.
Thank you. Sonia?
Hi, I'm Sonia Nizami. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate all of the work that you guys do, and I apologize for the late start because of me. My bad. I work in healthcare as well. I'm also a court-appointed special advocate for abused and neglected children. My reason for getting involved in politics was from when I was a teenager, and I saw my mom, who was uninsured. She had been a nurse and she had served her community, and unfortunately left her job because of healthcare issues. I saw her have to suffer because she was uninsured, and that spurred me on. And when I was young, I had an opportunity to get involved and work in on a campaign, and it just spurred my love for this. And I kept going. And helped run campaigns. I also helped organize a union and helped lobby for that same union. So I have always felt a duty to serve my community. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want to give back.
Thank you. Next question. What is or will be your top legislative priority and why? And we'll start with John this time.
Sure. Well, this one is near and dear to me. I'm very concerned currently with regard to where we're at pertaining to taxes at the county level. We have a situation in Jackson County specifically where we're number 2 in the state with regard to tax levels at the personal property level. We're currently our homes have been evaluated by a company called Tyler Technologies, where we've spent $18 million at the county level to make these assessments. See, we have a cap on assessments in Jackson County where you can't go above 15% unless there's been an in-person assessment. Well, with the in-person assessment, we can raise those taxes by as much as 45%, which is going to impact folks who are living paycheck to paycheck. It's going to impact folks on fixed incomes, and it's going to impact the elderly. And that is a huge deal in my book. I would like to see us consider legislation that would eradicate property tax for anybody over the age of 65 who is in their primary residence. Now, we could do means testing for that, but I think this is a very serious issue for us in Jackson County and possibly for other counties across the state. And so I would put forth legislation to protect our most at-risk people. and to be able to keep their homes.
Thank you. Carrie?
Yes. So, like I mentioned before, my background is child welfare. About 2 years ago, there was a huge story broken by the Kansas City Star regarding unlicensed residential facilities across the state that were treating youth, and they were also systemically abusing them. We had evidence that it was happening. There were convictions. There were findings made against them by the Children's Division, yet there were no laws on the books to regulate them in any way. Background checks weren't being performed against them. There were registered sex offenders working at some of these facilities, and they were across the entire state of Missouri. I was horrified by that and immediately started working to create a framework of regulation around this. Because of Missouri's strong belief in religious freedom, we really had to be cognizant of protecting religious freedom while also ensuring the safety of children, regardless of where they are. Through my work with, it was a bipartisan coalition, we worked to tighten those laws and pass a really huge piece of legislation in 2021. And I'm very proud of that. We've still got a lot further to go. The Attorney General's office and the Department of Social Services and I are working weekly to try to shut these homes down, to root out these offenders of child abuse and neglect across the state. And I will continue to do that. That is my sole goal in the legislature for as long as I serve.
Thank you. Sonia?
I would like to echo Carrie's sentiment. I want to put more money into social services, education, and mental health. When I was lobbying for the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, every budget year, it seemed like we would go through the budget line item by line item, and mental health was constantly cut. Social services was constantly cut, and education. We are losing programs all over the place and giving so much money away to big business. And I desperately want to change that, because I think it's like taking care of the least among us. And I want to help take care of these kids. I've been on one of my cases for over 2 years, and we've been through a dozen social workers. And the reason for that being is that they are so overworked and underpaid and overwhelmed. And this just isn't right. We're not doing right by our kids in any way. But that's just kind of my heart there.
Thank you. Kemp?
Yeah, so my priority is in supporting and advocating for our public schools. And as the husband, as the son of retired public school teachers, I fully support public education, and I'm going to do everything in my power to improve public education in Missouri. We're fortunate in Lee Summit. We've got outstanding schools. I want to keep it that way. However, across the state, over 1/4 of our public schools are now going, or public school districts are going 4 days a week instead of 5, in order to reduce costs. And in addition, as across the state and across the country, we have a looming teacher shortage, and we need to continue to work on that to help encourage more people to go into education and to help support those who are currently in education. So, I want to make sure that we continue to do that our teachers are supported, and that hopefully we can do better by public education in the state.
Thank you. According to a new law recently signed by Governor Parsons, Missouri voters will need to show photo ID in order to vote, beginning with the election in November. Most voters have the required Missouri driver's license or passport. However, those who do not are more likely to be disadvantaged. What will you do to help voters in your district acquire necessary photo ID? And Kemp, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, so I do think it's unfortunate that our Republican legislature has chosen to make it harder to vote rather than easier. I've talked to several voters as I've been knocking doors who came from out of state, and so many of them can't believe how much harder it is than in the states that they were at before. But to the point, I think it's important for our legislature, for our election boards, for everyone in office to make sure that we're sharing information that you can get a state non-driver photo ID for free. Unfortunately, that still adds a lot of hassle for folks, especially for women who may have to go and track down birth certificates and marriage certificates and divorce decrees. And if it's out of state, it could be, it can be a real hassle. But we need to share that. We need to share that it's possible. And for this election, I think we also need to share that you can vote with a provisional ballot without a photo ID, but then it's up to the election officials to certify that signatures match, and that ideally everyone can get some kind of photo ID, but it's going to be hard, and we need to do our best to publicize it.
Thank you. Sonia?
I agree that we need to publicize what what people need. And I personally disagree with having to require a photo ID to go and vote. I think that in itself disenfranchises or makes it far more difficult for people to vote. But we need to make sure that people know the avenues that they can take to go and get, like Kemp said, these other IDs. And I remember back in a time when I was working in campaigns, that wasn't a requirement. All you needed to take, a utility bill or something. I just wish that we were still back there today. So, but I absolutely will share, what we need to, what they need to do to get these IDs. Sorry.
Thank you. Carrie?
Thank you. Yes, since the law has gone into effect and prior to the law going into effect, when the law started, when it was initially passed, I immediately began reaching out to my constituents, letting them know via my weekly newsletters, via email, what was going on, what they would need to do in order to be able to vote. Since that time, I've been sending out mail, also giving out newsletters, and then I've been talking to thousands of voters at the door since June, and talking to them and letting them know to reach out to me, to reach out to the Jackson County Election Board, to reach out to the League of Women Voters if they have any questions or any concerns. Because what I see is a lot of confusion about what makes you eligible in order to vote. And this kind of confusion is in and of itself disenfranchisement. That's voter suppression, when we're purposely trying to confuse the voters with systems that frankly don't need to be in place. Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft testified to me under oath that there had been no cases of identity fraud in this state. There have been no cases of someone pretending to be someone else in order to vote in this state. There's been none prosecuted in this state. There have been a couple cases of voter fraud, but it was someone who was registered to vote in both Florida and Missouri and voted both places. And so not only is voter ID disenfranchisement, it's unnecessary in this state.
All right, thank you. John?
Yes. So I would make every effort to assist in making sure folks have got access to a state ID. But there's got to be proof that a person is who they are and lives where they live. Is it racist to require identification to get on to board a plane? I don't think so. Is it racist to require identification, a photo ID, in order to buy your meds? Nobody ever talks about that. Is it racist to require a photo ID in order to drive a car? I mean, the part of the argument has been that this is disenfranchising people in underserved communities. And I question that. Recent lawsuit in the state of Missouri, there was not a single instance that could be proven that there was an individual that would be impacted by this law. Now, is it feasible that you've got people of voting age who do not have a photo ID? It's possible. Is it likely? Not very. Now, what is likely is that we have 50,000 illegal aliens in the state of Missouri, and I would like to be able to put some kind of control in place to ensure that only legal citizens can vote. So I would, I support the law as it stands. I think photo IDs are important. In a lot of places they require thumbprints and a variety of other things. Nowhere in the world do they not require someone to prove who they are with some form of ID, which is unquestionable. So that's my stance.
Thank you. Okay, next question. On November 8th, Missouri voters will vote on several constitutional amendments. Amendment 4 would permit the state legislature to require Kansas City to increase spending on the police department from 20% of its budget to 25%. What is your position on Amendment 4? We're going to start with Sonia.
I've never been against defunding the police. I think that we need to put money into our police departments, but we also need to make sure that they receive proper sensitivity training and cultural awareness programs, like be involved in those. I think that too often our police departments are quick to judge, but I know that when I call 911, I want somebody to be showing up at my house when I need it. I'm not against increasing the budget, but let's make sure that we're educating our police.
Okay, and John?
Yes, ma'am. Currently, Mayor Quinton Lucas is trying to defund the Kansas City Police Department. No one's arguing this. This is an active thing that they're doing right now. I am for funding the police. In the state of Missouri, the number one city for homicide up until just recently, for homicides, mind you, was St. Louis. And Representative Cori Bush has been pushing for defunding the police. Okay, there are consequences to actions. Kansas City is currently 15 in the nation. Okay, out of 150 cities, we rank 15. That's terrible. I think funding the police is a critical issue for us. Our police force is as small as it has been since 1970. And what I'm finding is when I actually talk to police officers, they are demoralized. It's not just about funding. We have a situation where violent crimes are not being prosecuted. So they need as much support as we can give them. Otherwise, we're going to have a community that's going to resemble more like Mad Max or Gotham City than Kansas City. So I am definitely for funding the police.
Thank you. Kemp?
Yeah, I think everyone's for funding the police, but I'm against Amendment 4. Kansas City is currently the only city, the only municipality in the state of Missouri that doesn't have local control. And very honestly, I would have thought that Republicans and Democrats alike would have been against that because of local control and the claimed claimed interest in that. But I don't believe the state should be voting on what Kansas City's budget for that should be any more than I think they should be voting on it for Lee's Summit or for O'Fallon or for any other community across the state. So I do believe that funding is very important. We certainly all want everyone wants safe communities, but I'm 1000% against Amendment 4.
Thank you. Carrie?
Sure. I want to start by saying that Mayor Lucas did not defund the police. The city council voted to allocate $42 million of the large police budget to community intervention and prevention programs within the police department. So that's a common misconception. The current budget for the police is 20% of the Kansas City's budget. Amendment 4 would move it to 25%, which is about $65 million. So essentially, this is going to cost taxpayers $65 million statewide. So people at Cape Girardeau are going to be voting on raising taxes in Kansas City. And you're right, Kemp, this is the only city in the state of Missouri that does that. So my proposition is, as someone who has worked with the police throughout the entire career and crimes, I to do more to recruit better quality law enforcement that can protect our communities. And that probably has to do with salary and a lot of ways that we can retain them and recruit them. But I think that that should be the vote of the people who are going to be taxed and paying for it. It should be the people of Kansas City that are voting for it. And so I absolutely support the police. I support community policing. I support prevention and intervention programs, including mental health resources and getting social workers to be doing the jobs that a lot of the police are doing. So police would be very grateful for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Another constitutional amendment on the ballot in November would legalize recreational marijuana in Missouri. Amendment 3 is over 35 pages long and contains multiple provisions, including a 6% state tax and expungement of simple marijuana convictions. What is your position on Amendment 3? And we're going to start with John.
Well, my answer is going to be mixed on this. I'm not for recreational use of marijuana in any way. However, I do feel like it should be decriminalized. But I'm also not interested in having it on a constitutional amendment. I'm just like, why are we doing that? This should be something that's voted on democratically in the House and the Senate. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I would not be in support of this particular constitutional amendment, even though I am for the decriminalization of marijuana. I feel like there are a lot of people who are spending time in jail and have their lives have been ruined because of simple possession or use of marijuana. And ultimately, it's not just the taxpayers who pay for that, as far as the incarceration, but it's the communities and the families that pay for that when these people are taken from their families and incarcerated. And, they otherwise could be productive members of our society. So I am for the decriminalization of marijuana, but I don't particularly agree with this constitutional amendment.
Okay, thank you. Kemp?
Yeah, I support legalizing marijuana for adults over 21 years old. And I do believe, like John was saying, that we need to expunge the records of folks who have been convicted of minor marijuana infractions. But I am ultimately in favor of it. I think it's better to have it regulated and to provide tax revenue and to have it controlled than it is to have it purchased on the black market. I think Amendment 3, does have some good provisions in it, some things that could be better. It's not perfect, but I will vote for it because I don't think we're going to get anything better out of our Republican legislature. Once again, we're voting on stuff like this because our legislature has been out of touch and has been slow and non-responsive. So while it's not perfect, I will be voting for it.
Thank you. And Carrie?
I have to agree with both of the gentlemen before me. It is not a perfect amendment by any means. I agree with expungement. I agree with legalizing recreational marijuana, decriminalizing it as well. I believe that it should be for adult use only and that it should be a regulated industry. So we ensure that it is safe, that what people are getting is what they think they're getting, as opposed to things on the black market. I also think that we could be using the revenue wisely to invest in education and infrastructure across the state. Medical marijuana what we receive in taxes from that should be used for veterans. I believe that we could do a whole lot more for our veterans in this state, especially with rehabilitation, getting them back into the workforce, as well as getting folks who have been excluded from the workforce due to marijuana convictions. We do have a pretty severe workforce shortage in the state, and that would be a really great usage of that. I would say, the amendment is not perfect, but there's a reason why it's on there. There's a reason why we have ballot initiatives, and it's because the legislature often reaches a stalemate. With the supermajority, they often devolve into a party that eats itself. And this last session, we barely passed any pieces of legislation. It was some of the least amount of pieces of legislation that were passed in the history of the state. So if they could have passed a better piece of legislation, they would have.
Thank you. Sonia?
I will be voting for the ballot initiative. I believe that, recreational marijuana use for adults, that's their choice. And I think that we can definitely use the revenue for the state. I absolutely think that these records need to be expunged for minor marijuana use, as everyone has said. So, yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of this amendment.
Right. Thank you.
And I was really fast.
Okay. Amendment 3 is an example of a citizens initiative petition. By our current law, getting such a petition on the ballot requires obtaining signatures of 8% of the voters in 6 of the 8 congressional districts. Once on the ballot, a simple majority of voters is needed for the measure to pass. A new law was proposed in the last session of the Missouri House, which would increase the required signatures to 10% in all of the 8 districts and require 2/3 of the voters to support the measure in the election. This proposal is likely to come up in the legislature this session. What is your position on increasing the difficulty for citizens petitions? And we're going to start with Kemp.
Yeah, so I'm against changes to the petition process. And that's an issue that I'm going to prioritize in office, is to protect our process. It's really, I think, one of the purest forms of democracy that we have in the state. The ability to have citizens put something on the ballot directly. And it's allowed our citizens to expand Medicaid and to, right to work, to kick right to work out. So I am in favor of keeping it as it is. I know that it will come up again. It will be attacked because our Republican legislature doesn't like the citizens overruling them on things. But I promise to fight for it, and I believe it should stay as it is.
Thank you. And John?
Well, I'm going to have to agree with Kemp on this one. I am not for increasing the difficulty to get ballot, to get for the petition process. I feel like it's part of the democratic process, and ultimately making it more difficult goes against both the spirit and the letter of the law with regard to what makes us Americans. So yeah, I'm in support of keeping it the way it is.
Thank you. Sonia?
I'm absolutely in favor of not changing the ballot initiative process. As Kemp said, this is the way we express our vote or our voices. This is a direct vote. This is our democracy. And anything that takes away from that is absolutely violating our rights. We need to be able to have our voices heard at the ballot box, and I will vote every time to make sure that stays stays true.
Thank you. Carrie?
I'm going to go ahead and agree with everyone else who's already spoken. And I'll go one step further to say that a lot of the debate around this specific language in the House devolved into folks in the legislature not wanting ballot initiatives to pass with the majority of those votes coming from highly populated areas like Kansas City and St. Louis and Columbia. They wanted to kind of divide that up more and weight the vote of more rural communities heavier than they would be in Kansas City or St. Louis, making a Kansas City vote half of what would be a rural vote, essentially. I think that that is incredibly undemocratic. If the entire state votes for some, we're one state. I know often that we're divided into rural and urban areas, and I think that that's a huge mistake. A lot of the things that urban folks experience is the same stuff that rural folks experience. We're all Missourians. And we all need to be voting in the best interest of the entire state, as opposed to just one region or another. That's something that I take very seriously whenever I look at a piece of legislation is how is it going to impact folks that I've never met before, folks who live completely differently than I do in another part of the state. Their votes count the same as mine do, and the legislature needs to respect that.
Thank you. Missouri legislators have a bad record for not following the will of the people as expressed through the initiative, petition, and election process. We saw this with puppy mills and Medicaid expansion recently. Will you support and fund issues that have succeeded through the initiative petition process? And we're going to start with Sonia.
Yes, I mean, I will. I have told people time and time again when I'm on the doors, you know, we might not agree on everything, but I will work for you. I want their voices heard, and I will talk to my constituents once elected to hear what they think. I'm going to be their employee. It is my job to listen to them, but I'm also going to listen to myself. That is really important. You know, they've chosen to elect me, you know, if they choose to do that. And so it's going to be a little bit of both, but yes, I will always listen to my constituents and I will back up their votes.
Thank you. Carrie?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a huge, strong proponent of funding Medicaid expansion since we passed it a couple of years ago, and begged and pleaded with my colleagues across the aisle to uphold the will of the people of their districts, the people of their districts who voted for it. It's a shame that we're in a situation where folks don't respect the outcome of elections, whether that's because they don't like who won or they don't like the issue that won, and so they don't want to support that. I think that it's absolutely destroying this institution, this grand American experiment that we all are so in love with, and it's a shame. I will absolutely support anything that the folks of the state of Missouri vote for, even if I disagree with it. That's my job. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States and to the state of Missouri, and if they pass something, even if I'm against it, I will vote for. I will vote to fund it if that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I will certainly not vote to undo the will of the people, as I've seen done time and time again, whether it's through Clean Missouri, whether it's through not funding Medicaid expansion, and now through trying to strip the initiative petition process from the people themselves. So I will always support the will of the people of the state.
Thank you. Kent?
Yeah, absolutely. Will support any of the petitions that are passed. I think that, as we talked about, it's the most democratic thing that we have here in the state, probably, is the initiative petition process. And whether I vote for something or not personally will not matter at all. I will follow through on the vote of the people. And it was disappointing to me. It was disappointing to me that it took us 2 years to get Medicaid expansion funded, because when I voted for it, I thought we were voting to fund it as well. And so 100%, if the voters vote one of the many amendments through, I will push to make it happen.
Thank you. John?
Well, for me, it's easy. I would say, generally speaking, I will gladly support most initiatives that pass through the process. I'll support anything that supports individual rights and liberties and expands on that. Although I think it's important to be critical of anything that expands the role or the size of the government, because quite frankly, once we put agencies out there and services out there, they rarely ever go away. And right now we're looking at a cap on taxes in Missouri at 4.5% with regard to income tax, and everything has to be funded. So I've got 2 ears and one mouth, and I will be listening, and I will be the best representative of the people that I can be. But like I said, I will be critical of anything that expands the role or the size of the government. Doesn't mean I won't support it, but I will be a vocal person if it seems like what we're trying to do is going to be expanding the footprint of government in any significant way.
Thank you. Would you support changing Missouri law to require financial compensation to persons who are wrongly incarcerated and later exonerated? And this will go to Carrie first.
Absolutely. It's maybe the easiest question we'll get all night. Absolutely. If you've been wrongly convicted and then later exonerated, the state owes you a debt that they cannot repay monetarily. There's no amount of money that can be put on time that you're spending behind bars when you're an innocent person. There's no time. You can't get time back. You absolutely can't. We've got to do everything we possibly can to provide restitution to these folks and to give them a leg up to try to get them to where they would have been. And that means helping them reintegrate back into the community. That means helping their family. That means helping them with any psychological and sociological support that they need in order to get where they need to go. It's absolutely disgusting that the state doesn't already provide restitution for those who are wrongly incarcerated. And this should not at all be a partisan issue. And I don't believe that it is. When someone the worst thing I can imagine is being wrongfully convicted of a crime that you did not commit and serving time and being away from your family, being away from your job, losing your life in that kind of a way. And like I said, I absolutely support restitution, and I support expanding programs to help people reintegrate back into the community and to try to get them to where they need to be.
Right. Thank you. Sonia?
Short answer, 100%. I think that we do owe them restitution because we have taken away how much time from their lives, not only to earn wages and think about taking care of their family. We've taken away the possibility of their livelihood going forward, because even somebody who has been wrongly convicted, there is this black cloud hanging over their head. They had been in prison. They had served this time. And clearly you must have done something wrong, which is absolutely incorrect. But we owe them for their time and just taking away their life for however long it was. So yes, I would absolutely support that.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, this is a no-brainer. Ultimately, of course, there should be restitution, no doubt. But I'll throw this out there because no one's talking about it. Where's the restitution coming from? Who's paying for it? We are. Okay. So let's think about what we're going to do to try to prevent these kinds of things from happening. I think you have to hold the DAs and you have to hold the police accountable for when they screw up. And I'm not sure how we finance this, because quite frankly, if someone's spent 20 years in prison, incarcerated, I mean, what's that worth? $12 million? I mean, how are we going to figure out? Do we put a blue ribbon panel together to identify what a person's life is worth based on time in prison? Do we do it based on what they could have achieved? These are complicated questions. And I'm very interested in figuring out how we would do this. But I think we need to essentially look at these DAs that are interested in putting people away and hiding evidence, because these are the kind of things that ultimately come out. And there's got to be, we've got to hold their feet to the fire. There has to be some repercussion for folks who are putting people away inappropriately. So, but yes, I think of course there needs to be restitution. We're responsible.
Thank you. Kim?
Like all the others, I agree. The state needs to provide some type of financial compensation to folks who serve time and been wrongly accused and then exonerated. I don't think we can just say, oops, or we're sorry, and that's it. And I guess, and I think John is right. We need to have it would be good for us to have a process on how to do that. We wish we didn't have to, but with regard to the cost, if the state can't afford to help all the folks that are trying to get back on their feet, how do we expect those individuals to do that without any resources and just getting out of prison? So it is, we've got to do better here in Missouri.
Thank you. Okay. What is your position on providing public funding to faith-based schools? We'll start with Sonia.
I'm completely against it. Look, here's the thing. If you want to send your child, and I'm not even just a faith-based school, if you want to send your child to a private school, that is your choice. You have the freedom to do that. But we pay into public education, and to take that money out of the public education funds based upon your choice, it's absolutely wrong. You have made a decision when you have had an opportunity given to you for, no, I'm sorry. I get a little bit worked up sometimes about this. I went to a private school briefly, and that was my parents' choice. I received a great education in elementary school, and I appreciate that education. I appreciate the education that I received in public school, but it was my parents' choice to send me there. They did not ask that their money was diverted into this private school, and I would never ask anybody else to do the same thing. So.
Thank you. Kim?
No, I don't believe public funding should go to private or parochial schools. Again, public funding should stay with, or public schools should get public funding. There needs to be public oversight of that public funding. And again, private schools, we've got some great private schools and parochial schools here in Lee's Summit, but I don't think they should be funded publicly, either directly or indirectly through vouchers. So no, I don't believe it should be on the taxpayers to fund private schools.
Thank you. And Carrie? Wait, I'm sorry, John. Sorry.
Well, when we talk about public funds and where they should go, I would argue that I'm the odd man out here. Okay. I believe that the money ought to go with the child, because at the end of the day, the key performance indicator is not the teacher. It's not the school. It's the child. Okay. That's what we should be focusing on. For 20 years, Kansas City had an unaccredited school system. And the same people who are saying that you can't take your own tax dollars and send it with your child to someplace else would have gladly forced the children in the underserved communities to go to an unaccredited school. They were given and give them no choice. Parochial school, who cares? If it's a better school, it's a better school. As a parent, I want a choice. Okay. We homeschooled 2 of our children when the public schools failed us. Now, a lot of poor people can't afford to do that. Why would we force them into bad schools? And by the way, when my folks moved us here in 1979, taxes were much lower in Jackson County, and somehow the Kansas City public school system was accredited. It's not about tax dollars. It's about will to do the right thing. and we've left the management in order to do the right thing for too long. And I stand for the children, and I stand for the parents in this regard, not the school board and not the teachers union. I stand for the parents and the children.
Thank you. Carrie?
Yeah, I want to start by saying that with public funding comes public oversight. And some of that oversight includes regulations, and none of these parochial and private schools want them. I know that firsthand from my work with House Bill 557, 560 in trying to put regulations in religious residential facilities. They do not want this kind of oversight that would undoubtedly come with this. Both charter and private schools have non-publicly elected boards, often for profit, and they are not held accountable to the taxpayers that are serving them. We reap the benefits of a good school district, even if you don't have kids within it. You reap the benefits of having high property values, of having good communities, of having good jobs, and having good resources when you have good schools in your district. I would also say that, I mean, we simply, if we were to divert public funds into vouchers, we would be in essence defunding public schools. A lot of our public schools are barely financially stable as is. If you look at rural communities, a lot of them are going to 4 days a week school weeks, as well as having problems with teacher retention and transportation. So all of this would absolutely kill rural schools.
Thank you. Okay. Do you support the banning of books in Missouri public schools and libraries? And if so, what criteria would you use to determine if a book should be banned? And we are starting with John.
Well, I've got an academic background, so I would say on the face of it, I am against banning books. I think that you start doing that, and it's a slippery slope. But having children in the school district and seeing some of the books that are being introduced in other school districts that are graphic in sexual nature, the question is it appropriate? For me, it's not so much about banning, it's about seeing whether or not it's an appropriate book for a given age group. I'm against banning books. I'm against banning thoughts and ideas. I'm against banning speech. At the end of the day, maybe I'm a strong libertarian when it comes down to that. I think ideas should be allowed to compete. So yeah, I can say that generally speaking, I am against banning books.
Thank you. Carrie?
I absolutely agree with John. I'm also against banning books and banning ideas. I think a lot of thought is already put into what books are available to kids and what is age appropriate. And that's handled by the school board, once again, who's elected by the people that live within that school district. We also have the ability of parents to interact with the school board, to interact with administration and give feedback on whether or not something is appropriate for kids. And we've also got to look at the capability of kids at different ages. An 11-year-old in 5th grade in one household may be very different from another in what they're capable of learning about. I have a lot of concern with the idea that books are so dangerous for kids and that ideas are so dangerous for kids. What are we afraid of? What are we afraid of? And I think that we need to be really clear about that. I see this as a veiled attempt to attack the LGBT community. I see this as a veiled attempt to kind of push back against changing demographics within communities, where communities start looking more diverse, and that can be really upsetting to folks within that community when it's looked a certain way for a really long period of time. And so I think we need to be really cognizant of that. Clearly, I don't want any children reading inappropriate books, but I think that we already have librarians and teachers and school boards and active parents that are handling that.
Thank you. Sonia?
I am completely against banning books. I have a huge library in my house as it is. And I mean, yeah, of course, you might want to consider what is appropriate. Maybe a 10-year-old shouldn't be reading 50 Shades of Grey. That's reasonable, but who also decides what is appropriate for a child to read and what isn't? Like Carrie was saying, books spur on ideas. Those ideas drive ambition. They give them a world of opportunity. And just because one person doesn't like what's being said, they're going to ban a book. Well, any sort of banning of books is a slippery slope. It's one thing, then another, then another, and then another. So I'm completely against it. And again, I want to be reasonable and say no 50 Shades of Grey for 10-year-olds. That's a joke. But I want my kids to be able to read whatever they want to read. I was able to read whatever I wanted to read as a child. And I think that that all kids should have that opportunity.
Thank you. Ken?
I'm 100% against banning books. I really am. I think our teachers, our librarians across the state are professionals. This is an area where they have more expertise, I believe, than certainly our legislature on this. I will also say that many of the folks that are concerned about the potential of getting a hold of a book like that don't seem to have a problem giving their kids access to the internet on the phone. And you can certainly find a lot worse things out on the internet than I'm sure any of the books in the school libraries. So I agree with everyone. I think it's a slippery slope. I think this is an area where, I think parental oversight should take precedence here for their own children, but I don't want someone else's parental oversight over my children.
Thank you. Department of Social Service funds were cut in 2020, leaving the department 200 employees short, including caseworkers dealing with children and adults with disabilities and Medicaid applications. How would you address this issue? And we're going to start with Kemp.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has to be a question of, is this a priority? Are social services a priority for our state? We need to, if they are, then we need to budget for it. We need to pay workers what they require in these departments. And right now we're not doing a good job of that. We chose instead to give an income tax cut to the wealthy, as opposed to trying to shore up our social services, Department of Social Services. So I think it becomes a budget issue. I think it becomes a priority issue. And right now, unfortunately, it hasn't been prioritized the way that I believe it should.
Thank you, Sonia.
I will almost always vote to put more money into social services. As I said, I've been on a case for over 2 years, going on 2.5 years, where we've been through a dozen social workers, and the turnover rate is just incredible in all the different divisions, because they're just not being paid and given what they need to be successful and continue on in their positions, in my opinion. So as Kim said, it is a budget issue, but I will vote to put more money into social services.
Thank you. Carrie?
Absolutely. I'm not going to repeat what friends before me have said, but essentially what we've seen since 2020 is numerous times that the legislature has actually attempted to restore some of those cuts, whether it be through salaries with the Children's Division or other DSS. In fact, when we attempted to increase the salaries for the Children's Division employees, the Governor Parson vetoed it in 2021, and the House overrode that veto, and then the Senate did not uphold it. And so this is something that we've really worked together in the House to address. The vulnerability of children in this state is at an all-time high because we have a chronic understaffing within the Children's Division. The folks that are looking out for those kids that are at most risk are essentially their staffing is decimated. It's absolutely decimated. They're at about 85% turnover rate from what I heard this last week, and growing. And I know that the other departments are facing that as well. And frankly, it keeps me up at night worrying about what my former colleagues are enduring. And more importantly, what the kids of Missouri are suffering through because we don't have the staff around to ensure their safety.
Thank you. John?
So I work on budgets fairly regularly. And it's one thing to say, oh yeah, we need to fund it. I guess the question I have is, what is the standard we're trying to reach? What's the goal? What is how many social workers do we need per capita? What's the caseload per social worker that we're looking at as far as what's optimal? How much money are we talking? But we need to identify some specific objectives. I'm also concerned, social workers are required when there's a problem, and these problems are varied. But the question is, are there things we can do, as a society within Missouri, to reduce the need for social workers? And what would that cost? What kind of programs could we do there? For me, social workers are they're definitely a needed a portion of our government. We need their resources. Trying to figure out how we fund them and what we're funding, that would be part of my job in that regard. But also identifying, what are the key things that they're working on and trying to ameliorate, and are there are policies or programs we can put in place to reduce the social ills that are being handled by social workers. I think it's a very complex problem with some complex questions that we need to ask. But I'd be supporting at funding, to optimal levels if we can identify those kinds of things. But I would need specifics in order to move forward on that.
Thank you. Last question. What question do you wish you were asked, and how would you answer it? Carrie?
What question do I wish I was asked? That is a very good question. I would say, okay. I would say, what role does the state legislature, what role should the state legislature play in a woman's right to choose? And I would say none at all. We need to absolutely repeal House Bill 126, which makes no exceptions for rape or incest, and is so ambiguously interpreted by healthcare systems across the state that it puts women at risk of dying from ectopic pregnancies, from molar pregnancies, from situations where they have non-viable pregnancies, and that they are unable to come to term with that child that they desperately wanted, and now they are at risk of dying because of this law. I believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe that a woman and their doctor and their family are the best equipped to make the decisions that affect their lives in that way. And I don't believe that it's the role of politicians in Jefferson City to insert their own morals upon the women of the state of Missouri.
Thank you. John?
Yes. So there are three things that I harp on. I hope you don't mind if I say three things, but first and foremost is crime. defunding the police is a critical thing. I think, it's hard to enjoy, all and reap the benefits of the work that you have if you have to worry about violent crimes, carjackings, the kind of things that our students have to put up with regard to shootings and things along those lines. So defunding the police is a huge issue. Education, I'm for parental rights. And then, we talked about it briefly, the county property taxes. We can talk about school districts all day long and how they need to be funded. If the property taxes are increased the way Frank White and his crew are looking at doing, and they actually increase them as much as 45%, which, is actually a realistic possibility, then you're going to see people fleeing Jackson County, and that will impact our ability to fund the schools that are so important to us and our children. So these are critical issues, I think, in the Kansas City metro area and throughout Missouri. And I've got some pretty strong opinions on it. I'm a fixer. I don't care if it's a Republican fix or it's a Democrat fix. I'm interested in resolving things to the benefit of our citizens and our our youth. So that's what I would have hoped to be asked.
Thank you. Kim?
So I would like to have a discussion around gun violence and school safety, particularly given what we just saw in St. Louis yesterday. I support the Second Amendment. I believe that law-abiding citizens should have the right to protect themselves. But as we've seen repeatedly in Uvalde, in Buffalo, and just yesterday in our own state, we have to do more to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. Because it seems like the last 20 years, the Republican position has been, we need more guns in more people's hands in more places. And that clearly has not worked in Missouri. I think there are things we can do, and I think we have to talk about it, and we have to not ignore it and hope it goes away. So I think we need to look at reasonable reforms, things such as universal background checks, red flag laws, closing the boyfriend loophole, some of the common sense changes that the vast majority of America wants us to look at. And I think, sadly, yesterday's shooting was just a reminder that we have to keep that on the forefront.
Thank you. Sonia?
I too would have liked to have been asked about a woman's right to choose. I grew up with my mom, who was a nurse, and as a young nurse, she worked in OB, and she saw a young woman die. She bled to death after trying to give herself an abortion with a broken glass Sprite bottle. She told me, a woman will do what she needs to do, but abortion needs to be safe and it needs to be legal. And the only way it can be safe is for it to be legal. As a survivor of rape and assault myself, if I had had to make those choices, that wouldn't be a choice. I don't want to feel scared just because I'm still of a reproductive age. And unfortunately, that is now the state that we're living in. It's unfortunate. And I will do everything I can as a legislator to protect women. We can feel whatever we want to feel, but it needs to be safe and it needs to be legal. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Candidates, it is time for your 2-minute closing remarks. The order will be the reverse of the first question. So Sonia, you get to go first.
Well, just again, thank you again for having me on this forum this evening. I apologize for all of the issues and for causing us to run a little bit late because of that. Couldn't get in, but I appreciate your time and listening to me. I am absolutely going to be a defender for our rights. I'm going to fight for every one of my constituents. And when I meet a constituent on a door and they say, you know, I'm voting for your opponent, I'm sorry. I said, please don't apologize. I will still work for you. And if that's just my philosophy. I'm going to work for every single one of my constituents. So I've always been a progressive. I won't change that opinion, but I will work hard, and I really would like all of your votes. Anybody in the 30th district who's listening, please vote for me, because I will always be a strong voice for you, and I will be accessible to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. John?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity tonight. This has been wonderful, and I must say I really like the folks that are across the aisle. I think they represent themselves well, and I always try to make a point of disagreeing without being disagreeable. I think that I'm probably the best choice for District 35 because I'm a subject matter expert in things that are critical to the state of Missouri. I have an extensive background in insurance over 20 years. I've been involved in healthcare for the last 10 years. I have a background in the military, 8 years in the Army Reserves, where I served as a nuclear, biological, chemical weapons specialist in a tactical combat unit, and then in a supply battalion. And I've spent the last 25 years in Civil Air Patrol performing search and rescue as an aviator and both as a ground team. Currently, I serve as the governmental relations advisor in national headquarters, and that's a lot of fun. I've got 9 years of college. I did my undergrad here at UMKC, my master's at Iowa State, and worked on my PhD at University of Georgia. And I'm an anthropologist with a social sciences background. I think when you combine all these things together, I'm a pretty balanced candidate who can speak to a variety of issues. I've got skin in the game because we've got 5 kids here in Missouri, and 2 that are currently in the Lee Summit School District. So I know what parents are dealing with. I understand the pain of the pocketbook and the impact of inflation. I understand what happens, the cause and effect when you defund the police and how this impacts us. And at the end of the day, I want to be the advocate for the folks of Lee Summit and Raytown and Kansas City. And I want to be your elected official at the state. My name is John Burrows, and I'm running for 35th District. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ken?
Yes, so thank you again to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. Thank you as well to all the candidates who took the time to participate in this. To the voters of District 34, you know, I think you've got a clear choice in this race, although it may not be clear if you just watch this, because my opponent did not show up. And I'm a common sense candidate. I'm a candidate who's going to work to improve opportunities for all citizens in Lee Summit. I'm not going to just rubber stamp my party's agenda. And as you've seen, I'm not scared to show up and have dialogue and have debate. I've been out knocking thousands of doors since April, and I've listened to the stories of our neighbors here in Lee Summit. And they're asking for our legislators to work on real issues together to make their lives better. And you can't do that if you don't show up. So, you know, a lot of these issues aren't easy to solve. I've worked in diverse organizations, and I've had experience in working with people who have different opinions and bringing them together to get things done. And that's what we need out of our legislature. So if you also believe that our Missouri state government has the power to improve the lives of its citizens, then I hope you'll support me in my campaign by visiting my website, kempstrickler.com, and voting for me on November 8th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carrie?
I want to once again thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum and for promoting voting rights, for promoting education about the election system. and for promoting candidates. It's so important that folks know what candidates stand for. I'm a wife, I'm a mother of two. I've also had two children in the Lee Summit School District, and they're the reason why I ran for office, to make Missouri a place where they would be proud to grow up, and I would be proud to have them grow up in, where they would have opportunities to both learn and to grow, to pursue education experiences and career experiences here in the state. What I've seen in Jefferson City has been a Republican supermajority that is more preoccupied with extreme cultural wedge issues than they are with getting things done. Since my time in Jefferson City over 4 years, I've managed to pass six different laws, as well as passing budget items to secure ARPA funding for Lee Summit. I did this by working with the Republican majority, by using my social work skills to try to motivate people to do things in the best interests of all of the constituents that we serve. My background in social work and in criminal justice has given me a unique opportunity to use my expertise, not only in those areas, but with my friends on the other side of the aisle to move a lot of pieces of legislation forward, to try to get away from those cultural wedge issues and focus on the nuts and bolts kitchen table issues that affect every Missourian. It's been an honor to serve for the last 4 years, and I hope that the people of Lee Summit and Raytown and Kansas City will have me for another 2. Thank you again to the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates, for your willingness to participate in the forum. And thank you to our audience for your questions and attention tonight. Remember, a recording of this forum will be available soon on the League's website. Please take time to share the insight you have gained tonight with your family and friends, and be sure to get out to the polls and vote on November 8th. Remember to consult vote411.org to review your candidates and ballot proposals. If you need help determining your district, please consult the Board of Elections website. Thank you and good night.